Welcome to our 2036 presidential election coverage. This evening, we're going to start the first step of the primary season, candidates' announcements. Let's get right into it. Ron DeSantis' approval rating has fallen by a very large amount, especially since the beginning of his term. Due to the ongoing depression, the economy is obviously not doing well, and so is President Ron DeSantis. The party of the GOP was wiped out in the 2034 midterms, losing the Senate for the first time in nearly a decade, as well as having independents and Democrats gain in all aspects of Congress except for the presidency, of course. This is not good news for DeSantis or the Republicans in the 2036 election. Republicans have been in office since 2016, only with a 4-year break in which Jon Ossoff was president, but due to his poor handling of the pandemic, Ron DeSantis took over. There was extreme voter fatigue among Republicans, and the only thing that held them in office was poor Democratic candidates and poor situations for those Democrats overall. Now here's Ron DeSantis' approval rating from 2033 when he was inaugurated. He had a plus 16% approval, 15% from Democrats, 96% from Republicans, and nearly 80% from independents. Now, in about 2035, 2036, it is at 40% approve, 57% disapprove, negative net 17%. Only 5% Democrats approve of him, 80% of Republicans, and only 30% of independents. Very bad news. This is also bad because many candidates for the Republicans are in the DeSantis administration, meaning that their being tied to him will not help them in the general election. However, this 80% from Republicans may help them win the primary, as DeSantis is still popular among Republicans overall. Here's a preliminary polling for the Republican primary. Currently, Vice President Mike Garcia has 18%, and then Secretary of the Treasury Glenn Youngkin has 15%, and Attorney General George P. Bush has 10%. Like I mentioned earlier, the top 3 candidates are all from the DeSantis administration, and DeSantis' 80% approval rating is definitely helping them. And 35% of voters are undecided, while the rest are going to other candidates. And now for the Democratic primary, 30% are undecided. Former Governor of Kentucky Andy Beshear, the runner-up in 2032, is by far the main contender. His name ID in 2032 was very low, however he nearly won, and likely without collusion from the Democratic officials in the DNC, he may have won. A lot of Democrats believe that he may have beaten DeSantis even, or at least would have had a far more narrow defeat than what Kamala Harris suffered at the hands of the GOP. He's definitely one of the top candidates with a large name ID, solid base of support, and a lot of money. 5% behind him, 15%, is Joe Kennedy III, another 2032 runner-up. He was the vice presidential nominee, which may hurt him as he was tied closely to Kamala Harris, the very unpopular Democratic nominee from that year. And in third place with 10% is Michelle Wu, the governor of Massachusetts. She is definitely running as a progressive, and while Andy Beshear may be a left-wing populist and Kennedy more of a liberal but more moderate, Michelle Wu definitely is taking the progressive lane and may get a lot of support from there. Meanwhile, for independent voters who either voted for Tulsi Gabbard or just registered as independents, currently Matthew McConaughey is by far the favorite. The independent governor of Texas, him being an actor, gives him very high name ID. Currently, he is tied with the undecided with 30%. And at 15% is Ohio Governor J.D. Vance, one of the more right-wing candidates, and 10% at 10% is Tulsi Gabbard, the governor of Hawaii. All 3 of these are governors, interestingly enough. Now to Boston, Massachusetts, we have a special announcement. Governor Michelle Wu is kicking out the 2036 presidential race, the first major candidate to announce. She's definitely leading in polling and has decent name ID. She's definitely a very strong candidate. Currently, her approval rating is plus 13%, 90% from Democrats, a respectable 12% from Republicans, and 45% from independents. She definitely has room to grow with independents, but overall, it looks like she's a good candidate. And out of Charleston, West Virginia, we have a major announcement. Governor Caleb Hanna is entering the 2036 presidential race. He was one of the youngest governors ever elected, way back in, I believe, 2028. He is not very well known, however. Let's check it out. About 15% of Americans don't know who he is. However, he does have a 50% approval, 35% disapproval, and net plus 15. That is pretty good, especially for someone who isn't very well known. He has a 10% approval from Dems, 80% from Republicans, but only 7% disapproval, meaning he has room to grow, and a good 50% from independents, meaning that he has strong support amongst independent voters. And out of Los Angeles, California, we have a major announcement. Katie Porter has announced her presidential run. The former governor of California, she is very progressive and may take away from some of Michelle Wu's progressive support. As you can see, she's decently well known, a net plus 12% approval. 6% of Americans don't know who she is. She has 91% from Democrats approval, 12% from Republicans, and 45% from independents, very similar to Michelle Wu. And out of Kansas City in Kansas, we have a major announcement. Jake LaTurner, governor of Kansas, has kicked off his presidential bid. So he's actually the fourth governor now, it seems, to have announced his candidacy. He was the chair of the National Governors Association and leader for Republicans, and overall is decently well known. As you see here, only 6% of Americans don't know who he is, very similar to Katie Porter. He has a net plus 14% approval, very popular, as have many of the candidates so far. He has 12% for Democrats, 85% from Republicans, though a 6% disapproval, meaning that he still has room to grow, and a very strong 55% from independents, definitely a good candidate. Out of Dallas, Texas, we have a major announcement. George P. Bush, the Attorney General, has jumped into the presidential race. The first DeSantis administration official so far. He will join the race and hope to become what his relative George Bush, and before that George H.W. Bush were as president. And he has a current plus 12% approval, very interesting. As Attorney General, he's been very closely tied to the economy, so that may be why. Definitely outperforming DeSantis in approval. Currently that is coming from a decent 10% from Democrats, a whole 90% from Republicans, and 60% from independents. George P. Bush is definitely a good candidate. He's decently moderate, so he has strong suburban support, and as you can see, good support from independents as well. And out of New York City, New York, for a major announcement, Hakeem Jeffries, the former Speaker of the House, announced his 2036 presidential bid. He recently stepped down in preparation to run for president and stayed as one of the top deputies in the House. But currently, his approval stands at minus 5%. Though that is pretty good for someone who was Speaker of the House. Most Speakers of the House have very poor approval ratings, but after that his approval rating has rebounded. He has an 88% approval rating from Democrats, only 8% from Republicans, which makes sense, and 35% from independents. Definitely a lot of room to grow, but his strong name ID will help him. Out of Concord, New Hampshire, with a major announcement, Senator Chris Sununu has entered the presidential race. Definitely a very good candidate. He is moderate and well known. As you can see here, he has a net plus 13% approval rating, 53 to 40, and about 7% of Americans don't know who he is. It's definitely room to grow, and a lot of Democrats like him too. 20% approval, and a 93% from Republicans, and 65% of independents. On paper, he's a very strong candidate. And out of Phoenix, Arizona, with a major announcement, Governor Reuben Gallego is the next to enter the presidential race. He won re-election by a very large margin for a swing state in 2034. He has strong appeal among suburban and minority voters, and definitely could be someone like Jon Ossoff, who enters as a dark horse but really gains ground in the primaries. Currently, 9% of Americans don't know who he is, but those who do approve of him by a net plus 11%. He has 98% for Democrats, 12% from Republicans, and 50% from independents. Strong ratings all around. Out of Des Moines, Iowa, we have a major announcement. Governor Ashley Hinson has jumped into the presidential race. Governor of Iowa, she, like Jake LaTurner, was a leader of the National Governors Association when Republicans controlled it. As you can see, she's actually decently well known, a plus 12% rating. Only 4% of Americans don't know who she is. She has a strong rating from Democrats at 14%, 92% from Republicans, and a whole 60% from independents. Definitely very good ratings. She, like Chris Sununu, is a good candidate on paper, but we'll see how she does in the elections themselves. Out of New York City, New York, with a major announcement, Chelsea Clinton, daughter of Hillary and Bill Clinton, has entered the presidential race in 2036. She has not held any political office, but is well known as an author and an activist. Let's check out her ratings. Currently, she's a minus 3% rating, but 13% of Americans don't know who she is. This is likely associated with being the daughter of Bill and Hillary Clinton, so she has a very low approval rating from Republicans and independents, but has an 80% rating from Democrats. Out of Newark, New Jersey, with a major announcement, Senator Andy Kim has announced his 2036 presidency. Andy Kim is pretty moderate, but liked by most wings of the Democratic Party. Currently, he has a pretty good approval rating, plus 15%. 7% of Americans don't know who he is. He has a 95% rating from Democrats, 20% from Republicans, that is very good, and 70% from independents. Very, very strong numbers. Out of Charlotte, North Carolina, with a major announcement, Representative Madison Cawthorn has taken the populist lane in the 2036 race. He's entered the race for president and is running as a very hardcore populist. Definitely a change from many of the more moderate members of the DeSantis administration. He may belong more in the right wing of the Independent Party, but this may help him in a presidential election. As you can see, he has a minus 10% approval rating, definitely not very good. Only 5% of Democrats approve of him, 82% of Republicans, and 30% of independents. And out of Boston, Massachusetts, we have a very major announcement. And as you can see here, Joe Kennedy III has officially entered the presidential race out of Boston. As you saw before, Joe Kennedy is one of the most well-known people and most popular Democrats. As you can see, only 4% of Americans don't know who he is. He's a plus 10% approval rating, 95% Democrats approve of him, 12% of Republicans, and 60% of independents. Definitely great numbers. He's a very strong candidate overall. And Fairfax, Virginia, a major announcement. One of the front runners of the GOP is about to announce. And Secretary of the Treasury Glenn Youngkin has declared his presidential candidacy. He is currently around Mike Garcia as the front runner of the GOP, one of the strongest candidates. Here is his current rating, plus 16% of people approve of him, 55 to 39, and 6% do not know who he is. 20% Democrats approve of him, 92% of Republicans, and 65% of independents. Glenn Youngkin has the name ID and the support to back up his candidacy. We're down for a very interesting primary fight between him and someone like Mike Garcia or Chris Sununu. At Detroit, Michigan, we have a major announcement. Alyssa Slokkin, the governor of Michigan, has announced her presidential bid in 2036. Democrats have not been doing well in Michigan in the most recent years, and her victory there in 2034 was by an especially large margin. She's definitely a strong candidate for the Rust Belt, which has recently been trending away from Democrats. She currently has a plus 15% approval. Only 9% of Americans don't know who she is. 88% of Democrats approve, 30% of Republicans, one of the highest you'll see, and 60% of independents. Out of St. Louis, Missouri, with a major announcement. Josh Hawley, member of the DeSantis administration, has kicked off his presidential run. He has a pretty strong approval, about plus 5%. 5% also don't know who he is. 6% from Democrats, 93% from Republicans, and 40% of independents. And out of New York City, New York, with a major announcement to make. Governor Reuben Williams has jumped into the presidential race. He's a very liberal and progressive candidate, so we'll see how he does. He currently has a plus 9% approval, but 11% of Americans don't know who he is. Definitely a pretty big number. 86% of Dems approve of him, 8% of Republicans, and 40% of independents. Out of Los Angeles, California, we have a major announcement. And Vice President Mike Garcia, the biggest candidate for Republicans, has announced his run for president. He's definitely the one that all the GOP has been waiting on. He's very well known across the country, and as you can see, decently popular, especially compared to President Rhonda Sanders, where DeSantis has a negative net 17% approval. Mike Garcia has a plus 3, which is definitely saying something. He definitely benefit from some more exposure though. 5% of Americans don't know who he is. And 10% Democrats approve of him, definitely very strong. 92% of Republicans and 50% from independents. We're down for a very interesting primary fight between him and Glenn Youngkin. And out of Raleigh, North Carolina, with a major announcement to make. Senator Josh Stein has entered the 2036 race as a dark horse candidate. Stein is a very strong candidate. He has been very popular in North Carolina, first governor, now senator. He will likely be a very strong candidate in the South in the upcoming primaries. Currently, 7% of Americans don't know who he is, but he's a plus 13% approval. 91% of Democrats approve, 16% of approval from Republicans, and 70% from independents. Out of Miami, Florida, we have a major announcement. Senator Maria Salazar has entered the presidential race. Salazar won an election to the Senate just in 2034, but she's still jumping in now. As you can see, she's a pretty good candidate. 10% of Americans don't know who she is, which is a plus 12% approval. 14% from Dems, 90% from Republicans, and 54% from independents. Out of Oakland, California, with a major announcement. Khanna has entered the race as a progressive. Just like Katie Porter, the senator from California, is very liberal. He was one of Bernie Sanders' top supporters back when Sanders ran for president. Let's see his popularity. He currently has a plus 8% approval, except 12% of Americans don't know who he is. He has an 88% approval from Dems, only 9% from Republicans, and only 30% from independents. Definitely not good, but he can stand to improve. Out of Green Bay, Wisconsin, with a very major announcement. Senator Duffy has kicked off his 2036 presidential campaign. Duffy was written off by many in 2034 in his Senate race. However, he won re-election by a very narrow margin, proving his strength in the state. He defeated a decent Democratic candidate and an independent in order to win. His approval is plus 10% currently, and only 6% of Americans don't know who he is. He has a 12% rating from Democrats, 93% from Republicans, and 55% from independents. Definitely a strong candidate. And out of Louisville, Kentucky, here it is, one of the most major announcements we'll get this primary season. Here we have it. Andy Beshear has entered the 2036 race, officially kicking off his campaign. He is one of the last to announce, but this is definitely purposeful. As soon as he announced, a lot of his opponents will try to launch a lot of attacks against him. But now he can start fundraising and really tour the country. His name ID is very high, as you can see. Only 5% of Americans don't know who he is, and 55% of Americans approve, only 40% disapprove, 94% of Democrats approve of him, and 30% of Republicans, one of the highest, if not the highest, for a Democrat on this list. 75% of independents approve of him. Andy Beshear is a very strong candidate. He may be able to bring back a lot of the voters that voted for Tulsi Gabbard over Kamala Harris in 2032. In the upcoming election, he's definitely a strong candidate. Here is the polling for the Democratic primary. Andy Beshear takes the lead with 21%. Narrowly behind him is Joe Kennedy III, and then we have Michelle Wu at 15%. At 10% is Hakeem Jeffries, but his low approval suggests that this might be the result of just name ID. That's how most people know him. On the extended list, we have Alyssa Slokkin at 8%, Stein at 6%, Reuben Gallego at 5%, and Andy Kim at 4%. And we have Chelsea Clinton at 2%, and Khanna, Reuben Williams, and Katie Porter all at 1%. Meanwhile, in the Iowa caucus polling, Andy Beshear has a massive lead of 8% over Joe Kennedy. Meanwhile, behind him is Alyssa Slokkin, very strong with the blue-collar voters, being from the state of Michigan. And behind her is Michelle Wu. And for New Hampshire, currently Joe Kennedy III is leading by 4% over Michelle Wu. Actually, Andy Beshear taking third place, and behind him is Reuben Williams. Out of Nevada, we have a very close race between Michelle Wu and Andy Beshear, only 2% separating them. Behind them is Joe Kennedy, and then we have Reuben Gallego taking fourth place. Gallego definitely wants to win this primary if he stays in the race long enough, because that will give his campaign a boost if he doesn't have success early on. And in the South Carolina primary, Hakeem Jeffries, a very establishment and moderate candidate, is leading by about 8% over Joe Kennedy III. And Andy Beshear is taking 14%, and Michelle Wu 10%. For the Republicans, Mike Garcia has 19%, only a 2% lead over Glenn Youngkin. Behind him is Senator Chris Sununu, and behind him is Attorney General George P. Bush. Meanwhile, Ashley Hinson takes 5th place at 9%, Sean Duffy at 8%, Maria Salazar and Josh Hawley tied at 4%. And Caleb Hanna is at 3%, Madison Cawthorn at 2%, and Jake LaTurner only at 1%. And the Iowa caucus, currently Mike Garcia is leading governor of the state, Ashley Hinson, by about 1%. And pretty far behind them is Glenn Youngkin. He'll definitely want to make up that ground to win the state of Iowa in the caucus. And Chris Sununu is at 11%. In New Hampshire, the very popular Senator Chris Sununu, very well known in the state and very popular again, is leading with 35% of the vote. Behind him is Glenn Youngkin, who would definitely do well here if Sununu was not in the race. And then tied at 14 is George P. Bush and Mike Garcia. Out of Nevada, Mike Garcia leading by 5 points over Maria Salazar. Behind them, Glenn Youngkin, and behind him is Chris Sununu. And finally, out of South Carolina is an exact tie between Garcia and Youngkin. Behind them is George P. Bush and then Chris Sununu. This is a very close state and will definitely be very contested. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe and turn on notifications to see more videos like this and be notified when they come out. Leave a comment telling me what you thought of the video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.